Hey, what's happening YouTube? My name's Gray, this is Consoletronix, and in the annals of gaming history under the header Run and Gun, one franchise stands unrivaled, often imitated, never bettered. It's the Konami classic Contra, and this is my Contra series review. The name Konami still resonates with gamers all over the world, although for very different reasons today than in 1988 when they ported the popular coin-op to the NES, and in the process positioned themselves as one of the elite developers for the system, second only to Nintendo themselves. There's not really much more I can say about this 8-bit gem that hasn't been said before, except perhaps this. This is Probotector, the European version of Contra, released a full 2 years after its US debut, and people wonder why the NES failed in Europe. Also outgo the Schwarzenegger and Stallone clones to be replaced with 2 generic robot lads. And why the change? Well, for that we have to thank the Germans and their peculiar laws regarding war in entertainment, which caused a bit of confusion on this side of the pond, as growing up I and many others thought it was a separate franchise. Crafting a sequel to a hugely popular and much loved game is never an easy task, but back then the coders at Konami had magic in their small Japanese fingers, and they worked their wizardry to produce a follow-up that didn't just meet expectations, but raised the bar for quality for every other developer. Yes, it's simply more of the same, running, jumping and gunning, but that's all we ever asked for. On the surface, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Operation C on the original Game Boy was just a quick cash-in on the sudden boom of handheld gaming. But with Nintendo serious about making the Game Boy a success by releasing the direct sequel to Metroid on it exclusively, as well as Mario Land and Link's Awakening, seems to have given Konami the shot in the arm required to ensure this small screen adaptation was every bit as good as the console versions we all knew and loved. Every new console generation sees developers old and new looking to take advantage of the new hardware with fresh-faced new IPs, and it can sometimes be a step too far for older franchises to recapture past glories on new systems. You hear that, Sega? Sega! But with Konami at the helm, we expected big things, and they injected fresh energy into an already iconic series and showed that their 16-bit output was going to be every bit as stunning and prolific as their 8-bit portfolio. I wasn't quite sure whether this game should make the video or not, as it's known as Arkhound in Japan and has a very different feel to it, but it bears the Contra label everywhere else, so it must be judged as such. And when you consider this is a 1992 NES release, despite the fact that Konami were at this time lighting up the 16-bit SNES scene, seems to me that they produced this stonking shoot 'em up for no other reason than just to prove to their competitors they could knock out the classics at will. But bloody hell, it's difficult, even by Contra standards. While Contra Hard Corps may not be considered anything extra special in the context of the franchise, for Mega Drive owners like me, it was like a revelation, because now us Sega fanboys could drop the act and stop pretending that we didn't care about titles like Castlevania and Contra, because once Konami were free from the Nintendo shackles, they wasted little time in getting games that for years were considered some of Nintendo's crown jewels onto their biggest rival's platform. And the extra effort Konami put into them is clear for all to see on screen, in a very public 2 fingers up to Nintendo. Always a prolific company, Konami now set their sights on the 32-bit Sony PlayStation and would craft some of the most iconic games of the era, like Silent Hill and Metal Gear Solid, so farmed out development duties on the latest Contra title to Hungarian studio Appaloosa Interactive, whose biggest claim to fame was developing all the Mega Drive and Game Gear Echo the Dolphin games for Sega, although I knew them best through the utter trash that was games like Cyborg Justice and Exo Squad. And sadly for all of us, Contra Legacy of War makes those latter 2 Mega Drive titles look like solid gold. This game is garbage, pure and simple. At first you don't succeed, try again. Wise words indeed, but somehow despite the debacle of Legacy of War, Appaloosa were once again entrusted with the Contra license. I assume Konami thought lessons had been learned, or more likely that they couldn't possibly make another game that bad. But bloody hell, they gave it a good go. For me, this insult of a game was when I and many other long-time fans simply tuned out of the franchise, and instead started going back in time to play the great games in the series that we'd missed out on first time around. I won't lie to you folks, when this new PS2 Contra game was released, it barely registered with me. I had been burned quite badly by Legacy of War on the Saturn, and I thought Contra had joined that illustrious list of great 2D games that failed to make the jump to 3D. But when I heard Konami were back in the development hot seat, I dared to believe that the franchise could rise from the ashes. And I'm pleased to report my confidence was not misplaced. Contra Shattered Soldier is a very welcome return to form for the classic series. A lot of gamers think that Konami's fall from grace as an A-list developer is a relatively recent phenomenon, but for me the warning signs were there way back in the PS2 era. Take this title, Neo Contra, as a good example. By no means bad, far from it. It just lacks that sparkle that was a trademark of Konami's back in the 80s and 90s. It's something you see again and again in their PS2 releases at this time, like in 10,000 Bullets and Demon Chaos, among many others. And at the time, I thought this would be a sad end to the Contra story. It's hard to believe, but this year, 2018, marks 30 years since Contra was first released. Damn, that makes me feel old. But back in 2008, to celebrate the 20th anniversary, Konami would release Contra 4 on the DS. Now, I never owned a DS, but after seeing this game up and running a few years later, I bought a 3DS and made this game my very first purchase. And what can I say? Gone are all the novelties and trying to implement what's popular in other games. Here, Konami went back to basics and simply presented an old school run and gun masterpiece. And whether you're a Contra fan or not, you simply have to play this handheld classic. It's simply brilliant. So there we have it folks, my Contra series review. From absolute absolute gems to steaming atrocities, the Contra series as a whole, in my opinion, is up there alongside other great franchises like Mario, Zelda and Final Fantasy as a timeless example of what truly great games should be. So my name's Gray, you've been watching Consoletronix, more videos up very soon, and please let me know your thoughts and experiences with Contra over the years in the comment section down below. So thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.